covering the world of professional wrestling. This is the Signature Spot with Chris Toplack.
3, 2, 1.
Thank you very much for tuning into the latest episode of the Signature Spot with Chris Toplack. As always, I greatly appreciate your ongoing support. It has been a whirlwind week with Double or Nothing, current state of the WWE, NXT TakeOver this coming Saturday. Plus, the pro wrestling world is buzzing about Jon Moxley. In just a matter of days, he will be heading over to New Japan to take on Juice Robinson. At Fyter Fest, he will be facing Joey Janela, and he just appeared on Talk is Jericho, and that was a tell-all interview. Not that we required any further validation, but it really proved the following. Vince is completely out of touch and needs to relinquish control. ASAP, by the way. The creative process is broken and ineffective. As Jon put it, it sucks, it's terrible. The majority of the writing staff is awful. You need to hear the examples of what he was handed. He does not pull back on that criticism. WWE just wants performers reading promos word for word, verbatim. They want actors, not wrestlers. They have no idea on how to properly construct storylines that make sense. As Dusty once asked, where is the money? And also, WWE is rapidly killing the passion among many of their performers. Jon Moxley noted he started dreading Mondays and couldn't even look in the mirror. He hated his character that much, and it's clear that others feel the exact same way. You need to hear this interview. So I'm going to recap Double or Nothing in its entirety. I loved it. I'm going to tell you why. It wasn't without its flaws, of course, but still, we're going to go over that. I'm also joined by Evan Ginzburg. He was an associate producer on the 2008 film The Wrestler starring Mickey Rourke, critically acclaimed, one of my favorite movies of that year, and also the documentary 350 Days, a very riveting look into the world of professional wrestling. Bret Hart, Ted DiBiase, superstar Billy Graham, Tito Santana, and many more are featured in this documentary. Plus, I will have predictions for NXT TakeOver 25.
Your weekly recap.
With sky-high expectations heading into the event, the entire AEW roster managed to exceed them by ultimately producing a home run in their debut event. It's now just a matter of building momentum and sustaining it. As we know, that's the most trying aspect of all. That's the hard part. And that being said, I do have confidence that they will. The set looked great, and while many commented that with separate entrances and exits that it resembled the old TNA Impact set, this was far more elaborate and visually appealing. The crowd was vocal, they were amped up, and definitely enhanced the overall presentation of the show. While Jim Ross did a serviceable job, Excalibur really held the commentary team together. Perhaps it was initial jitters, but Alex Marvez added very little to that dynamic. Obviously, he deserves time to develop. You can't just write him off yet. But a two-man booth of Ross and Excalibur would be preferred, at least in my mind. While the Casino Battle Royale was somewhat clunky and featured several unknown stars, this was also a way to introduce them to a wide audience, so it was necessary. I consume more wrestling than I should on a weekly basis, probably more than what's healthy, and there were still several wrestlers I'd only seen once or twice, or actually never. And as fully anticipated, MJF managed to garner a fair bit of heat in terms of reactions. Sean Spears, a.k.a. Ty Dillinger, formerly known as, and Adam Page, at least in my mind, received the loudest ovations. In terms of memorable moments, how about Luchasaurus choke-slamming Joey Janela to the outside of the ring through a table? Joey over-rotated, and he appeared to go neck first. It was a rough landing. And he claimed to be alive and well via Twitter, so I guess he's fine for now. By the way, Luchasaurus looked gigantic in there with most of the other competitors. Jimmy Havoc managed to sneak in a staple gun. Tommy Dreamer's crotch area definitely regrets it. The Final Four came down to MJF, Page, Jimmy Havoc, and Luchasaurus, with Page ultimately throwing out MJF after he managed to nearly win it all. This was arguably the only true weak match on an otherwise excellent show. Sammy Guevara versus Kip Sabian was an excellent lead-in to the pay-per-view, since it was a true reflection of what fans were going to expect. A high-paced match featuring several exciting spots, such as Sammy's Shooting star press to Kip off the apron. Kip got his arm raised, but they both have very bright futures within the company. The main card kicked off with ample pyro, which was somewhat surreal to witness since we're not conditioned to see it unless it's WrestleMania or at an overpriced Saudi Arabia event. SCU Christopher Daniels, Frankie Kazarian, and Scorpio Sky defeated the strong hearts of Shima, T-Hawk, and Al Lindemann. The match really showcased the talent of each man involved. In particular, I was impressed by the undeniable athleticism of Sky and the effort from Kazarian. I've said it before, I'll say it again. Christopher Daniels, the greatest independent wrestler of all time. The conclusion of the match saw Daniels and Kazarian hit the best Meltzer ever on Lindemann for the 1, 2, 3. It was perfect. An ideal way to get the crowd on their feet and pumped up to kick off the pay-per-view. We were then treated to our first big surprise of the evening. Kylie Rae, Nyla Rose, and Britt Baker all made their entrances for the triple threat match. Brandy Rose then made her way to the stage in full ring gear, which insinuated that she was going to inject herself into the match, but oh, quite the contrary. Instead, Awesome Kong was introduced to a very positive reaction. She's had a gig on Glow, so I really did not factor her in here, nor did basically any other wrestling fan. Allie also joined the commentary team to call the match. Allie's going to be taking on Brandy Rhodes in just a couple of months. Kong displayed her well-known power. While Ray and Baker utilized their speed and technical abilities, Rose didn't seem to be a big factor in this match, if you ask me. Britt Baker scored the pinfall after a shoulder breaker onto Kylie. The Doctor was the sensible choice to pick up the victory, as she will likely be pushed as the face of the AEW women's division. Best Friends, Chuck Taylor and Trent Beretta versus Angelico and Jack Evans was up next. As predicted, the Best Friends attempted to ground the two human springboards. Best Friends are the far more established team. I love their smooth maneuvers as a duo that are seemingly always in sync, but eventually, the mid-match hug gimmick could start to grow a little stale. Either way, at least for now, it's entertaining. Evans and Angelico each had moments to shine with a beautiful 630 splash along with a crucifix buckle bomb, but Chuck Taylor won the match for the team after a double stomp to Evans. Much to the delight of the fans, the two teams hugged post-match. Then, the lights go out. Who could it be? The Super Smash Brothers appeared, and then the lights went out again. Moments later, about half a dozen masked wrestlers just appeared out of nowhere, and it was very obvious the majority of the crowd did not recognize the team of the Super Smash Brothers or have any awareness of who they were. Either way, another stellar match. Mark it on your calendars, a promo then aired, which signified that All Out would be taking place Labor Day weekend. That's right, All Elite Wrestling is coming home August 31st at the Sears Arena. Tickets on sale June 14th. Mark that down. I apologize in advance if I don't get the names correct or accurate. The name of Hikaru Shida, Rico, Ryu Mizunami defeated Aja Kong, Yuka Sakazaki, and Emi Sakura. This was a convoluted but fun match. The conclusion saw Shida pin Sakura following a running knee. I still adamantly believe that Yuka will become the biggest star out of each competitor involved. She is just so likable, reminds me a lot of Kairi Sane. Here's where it gets emotional. Brother versus brother. Cody with his wife Brandy Rhodes versus Dustin Rhodes, the Natural. And prior to the match, Brandy Rhodes handed Cody a sledgehammer, where he proceeded to smash a throne on stage that resembled Triple H's symbol, perhaps a direct shot at Triple H, or maybe even more of a message of, do I have your attention now, to WWE. Yes, it was hokey. It was merely entertainment. I didn't love it. I noticed many fans online took it far too seriously. How dare they? As if WWE has never fired shots or done something similar on their programming. Yes, I know many are saying, well, AEW's not even established yet, but they're getting there in whatever. Again, this is the entertainment industry as much as it's pro wrestling. While it certainly wasn't a standout point, let's not allow it to take away from this emotional match. This was storytelling 101, where high spots were not needed. Just fundamental wrestling with plenty of emotion attached. Can Cody actually defeat the older brother he's always looked up to? And in Dustin's case, can the old dog live to fight another day? Adding to the presentation was Earl Hebner as the referee. Goosebumps the second the Dusty champ broke out. At 50, Dustin is still such a sound performer. While Cody did everything to hold his own, he's a great character. Brandy Rhodes was eventually ejected for interfering. It was inevitable. Dustin started bleeding profusely, and he resembled a horror movie victim. I'm not kidding. I legitimately had concerns about the match being completely waved off. Several fight forever chants were heard throughout the match. We often hear that during NXT, the ultimate compliment. Great near falls that saw Cody win following the Crossroads. After the match concluded, Cody took to the microphone and noted that Dustin does not get to retire here. Cody asked for a favor in front of God and the whole world, a fight for the fallen. Cody signed his name to a match against the Young Bucks with a partner of his choosing. He doesn't need a partner or a friend. He needs his older brother. The two then hugged, they embraced in one of the most emotional moments in recent memory. Kudos to Cody on his delivery. Very, very believable. And I got to tell you, I definitely got a little misty-eyed. And after rewatching this match 12 hours later, I adamantly believe it was match of the night. A presentation of the new AEW Championship was set to take place. The man to introduce it, Bret the Hitman Hart, a huge surprise. I popped. They received a massive ovation. My hero and arguably the greatest storyteller in pro wrestling history. I'll admit I smirked thinking of Vince's reaction when he hears about this. Bret thanked the crowd and noted the belt is absolutely beautiful. Hart introduced Hangman Page, who will now face the winner of Jericho or Omega for the new championship. MJF appeared. He insulted both Bret and Page, and of course the live audience too, at such a young age. He's years ahead of his time in terms of maturity as a heel. He's a real natural. As MJF attempted to leave, Jungle Boy and Jimmy Havoc came out, cut him off. They proceeded to beat him up. Bret showed off the new belt. It didn't really come off that well on television. That said, it's definitely stunning, and it partially resembles Big Gold. There's some great photos of it online. For the AAA World Tag Team Championship, the Young Bucks defending against the Lucha Brothers. Zero Miedo. Pentagon is the epitome of cool, one of my favorites in the game today. Everyone had the opportunity to shine in this match, but my God, Rey Fenix really took advantage of the spotlight. He pulled out spots that I did not even know were physically possible. Yes, some could claim this match relied far too heavily on spots, but quite honestly, these were two of the best tag teams in the world playing a proverbial game of one-upsmanship, and this was great. I watched this entire card with a good friend of mine who rarely, if ever, watches wrestling, and this match simply blew him away. Again, matches such as these speak both to the hardcore and casual audience. In this case, it firmly created a new fan of the product, so that's a big positive. The Young Bucks retained following a one-armed Meltzer driver. I would have preferred to see the Lucha Bros win the titles back, but I still appreciate the outcome. Overall, really solid action. And in the main event of the evening, Kenny Omega versus Chris Jericho is high stakes. The winner receives a match against Adam Page for the AEW World title. An interesting Chris Jericho entrance featuring several different versions of himself. He's truly the David Bowie of professional wrestling. Now, did this match live up to their modern-day classic in Japan? Not quite, but it was still a very damn good match, with each putting forth a ton of effort. And despite the fact that each man landed several big moves, Jericho ultimately won the match with the Judas effect, which is a spinning back elbow. In terms of negative reactions, I posted a quick video of this online. Jericho retweeted it, got a ton of responses. Very, very polarizing. Some loved it due to it being highly effective, while others just expected way more and just thought, is that it? Because Andrade could do a better job at that. I will say pro wrestling was built on simple yet effective moves that end matches. The DDT comes to mind. He just needs to polish it up a bit so it looks even more impactful on television. It will get there. Don't worry about that. Either way, it's Jericho versus Page for the AEW World title. It makes sense. Jericho took to the mic. He demanded a thank you from AEW, and the biggest surprise was left for last as Jon Moxley emerged from the crowd, a.k.a. Dean Ambrose. If you don't recognize the name, he got a huge ovation. He planted Jericho and the ref with dirty deeds, which I'm sure is going to be named somewhat differently at this point, and then proceeded to brawl with Kenny Omega. Moxley eventually landed dirty deeds onto the poker chips that was on stage and then threw Omega off stage. The show then faded to black. It was the perfect way to conclude Double or Nothing. So there you have it. 2 main event feuds have been established. That's exactly what they need moving forward. In terms of improvements, WWE sets a high benchmark for production. And while the production was very reputable here, a lot of key shots were missed out on, and this will improve over time. Now, in terms of my overall thoughts on the show, AEW hit a home run for their first time out. That's undeniable. The success of Double or Nothing is great for the entire industry, and that same philosophy applies to WWE and every other promotion, so just enjoy the ride. I give it about an 8.5 out of 10. There's a couple of different NXT TakeOver events in recent memory I would definitely place higher, but this was still a great outing for AEW moving forward. Just a quick thought before we move on. For whatever reason, there's a real vocal contingent of pro wrestling fans who believe that there's a line in the sand and you must choose a side. That's merely your prerogative, and no one has stated that you must choose a side. I loved Double or Nothing, and I'm very excited for AEW's future, yet I still watch Raw and SmackDown Live on a weekly basis and adore NXT, as you know. Ultimately, AEW's success is great for the entire industry as we have more wrestling to consume. Guess what? A lot of that wrestling is really quite good too. Plus, there's New Japan Pro Wrestling, ROH, MLW, Impact, NWA, AAA, and hundreds of other promotions. We are truly spoiled. So again, just sit back and enjoy it. Up next, I'm joined by Associate Producer of 350 Days, a riveting pro wrestling documentary featuring the likes of superstar Billy Graham, Bret Hart, among many, many others, as they peel back the curtain on the severe toll working on the road 350 days a year took on their bodies, marriages, their families, and their psyches overall too. They were true rock stars, so there were a lot of highs and lows. So he's going to walk me through that entire process. Also his work on the 2008 breakthrough movie, The Wrestler, starring Mickey Rourke, and also Evan's thoughts on the current state of professional wrestling.
And now, our featured guest.
A very special guest joins me today. He was an associate producer on the critically acclaimed movie starring Mickey Rourke titled The Wrestler. I love that movie back in 2008 and still to this very day. Most recently served as associate producer for the incredible pro wrestling documentary 350 Days. Also the host of the Evan Ginzburg Show, available via villageconnectionradio.com. You wear a lot of hats. The question is, what don't you do?
I don't do stand-up. I was telling you prior to the show. It's my stomach couldn't take it. But,
So I consider you a bit of a pro wrestling historian. You've enjoyed it throughout your entire life. So how did you originally get into it? Walk me through it from scratch. Who are your favorites, both past and present?
well, ironically, it was a day just like today in New York, pouring rain. And I was a bored kid, maybe 11 or 12 years old. And back in the day, we had 13 channels in the UHF dial. So just bored out of my mind. There was no internet, no video games. I'm a kid.
No dirt sheets.
No dirt sheets. So I go on the UHF dial, and I'm just checking each channel. And all of a sudden, I'm watching this Indian getting pummeled by this much larger guy. And I honestly didn't even know what it was, but it turned out it was WWF Wrestling, and Chief Jay Strongbow was taking a pounding. Then all of a sudden he goes into this herky-jerky war dance, and he beats the much bigger guy. And I'm like, wow, what is this? And, so I'm watching the rest of the show, and to me, as a kid who's a total mark, it's Marvel superheroes and supervillains, and it's larger than life, and I'm just riveted, and so I figured out when it would be on again, and and I started watching it religiously, and then also on UHF we had the tapings from L.A., the Olympic Auditorium, and Gordman, Goliath, Greg Valentine, young Roddy Piper, Butcher Paul Vachon, all these great Hollywood Blondes with Humperdinck, and then I found the Florida show on the UHF dial with Gordon Soley, Dusty, the Funks, Eddie Graham, the Briscoes, and oh man, it was like paradise for a kid, especially a kid who wasn't smartened up. To me,
it was legit.
These were dastardly villains, and God, I just love Bruno with all my heart, and Strongbow, and Monsoon, and Dean Ho, and it was, as a kid, you're looking at it with like stars in your eyes, and so finally, I beg my dad, and Dad, let's go to wrestling. So he takes me to Madison Square Garden. I could tell you the date, June 24, 1974.
Wow.
And the main event was Fred Blassie and Nikolai Volkov against Bruno and Strongbow. And the co-feature was the Valiant Brothers against Dean Ho and Tony Gurria. And I walk into the Garden, and the first thing that crosses my mind is, wow, it's in color. Because I always watched it on a black and white TV set.
Yeah.
So I was a dumb kid. I'm like, this is in color. So, and oh my God, it's like, the best way I explain it to younger fans is when Pedro Morales, who had been the champion for several years right before that, and Bruno walked down the aisle, the fans loved them. It was like walking into like heaven. It's like the only way the excitement, it was off the charts, and everybody there was like me. They were all marks. But, maybe I'm exaggerating, but I would think 95% of them, the way they were reacting, and every time Bruno or Strongbow made a comeback, the building just shook, and it was amazing. It was really amazing, and I was hooked. And basically, from 1974 to 1985, I would say I went to 19 out of 20 Garden cards and Coliseum cards and Westchester County Center, and I saw the greatest of the greats of that era. And finally, I was smartened up, and I realized the NWA was a far superior product.
Yes, it was.
In the late 80s, and I would go to Philly every month and see the Horsemen and the Midnight Express, Rock and Roll Express, Road Warriors. It was amazing. That I would say the NWA of the mid to late 80s at that point was the greatest wrestling to this day that I would ever see live on a regular basis. I'll tell you, to see, for example, Flair against Terry Funk live, it was just unbelievable. It was unbelievable.
Put that up
Flair
against Hulk Hogan and Zeus. Are you kidding me?
I'll tell you, Hulk Hogan and Piper, Hulk Hogan and Orndorff, that was exciting. I mean, but Hogan was limited. Now, Flair could make anybody look great.
So we go from 1974. Let's go to the present day, 2019. I see you on social media. We connected a couple of weeks ago. I feel very much the same way at the moment. WWE's current product, you claim juveniles, stale, unoriginal. So we look at that, and then we just had Double or Nothing. Was that the breath of fresh air you were looking for?
WWE, it's just very frustrating to me. As I get a lot of criticism. You're always ripping on WWE, and I'll say they have one of the greatest talent bases in the history of this business.
Easily.
Certainly the biggest budget in the history of this business.
Yes.
And, I could take any one of those cards, take that incredible talent base, and just have, a far superior wrestling show. And I just think Vince at this point is embarrassed by wrestling. He wants it to be sports entertainment, a variety show.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the thing. Comedy is supposed to be funny. that comedy is not funny. Promos are supposed to be exciting and make you long for the actual match, only they don't. It's stilted, juvenile, robotic. So here you have Double or Nothing, and I'm watching this, and I'll tell you honestly, when I saw All In, I thought it was very good, but I didn't think it was great. I didn't think it warranted $200 ringside. So I was watching this with an open mind, and I sat there and said, Dustin and Cody was the best match I've ever seen either of them in. I said it was absolutely great. It was riveting. It was dramatic. It had great wrestling. You weren't sure who was going to win. It was just tremendous, tremendous. And then the Lucha Brothers and the Young Bucks were tremendous. That's as good a tag match as you're ever going to see.
Definitely.
Yeah, and Jericho and Omega was great also. I didn't think it was great as the other two I just mentioned, but it was great. So, you had 3 4-star plus matches in a row, and the undercard was all solid. There was no stinkers, and you just sat there and go, this is what a pay-per-view should be.
Big surprises as well, too. We had 3 big surprises with Awesome Kong, Bret Hart, and, of course, Jon Moxley, too.
Sure. I mean, it was – and here's the thing. I got bored with the selectively poor, mentality in pro wrestling. Ringside for WrestleMania is $5,000. They had guys spending hundreds of dollars sitting behind poles they couldn't even see the ring.
Yeah.
Okay? So that's not an issue, but $50 for a pay-per-view. Oh, my God, they're asking $50. Get a couple of your friends together,
Exactly.
Get some junk food, forget your problems, and enjoy a great night of wrestling. You have a problem with $50, but you don't have a problem with $5,000? They always go, the WrestleMania experience. What's the experience? The boss's son-in-law comes in on a bike, and his genius son flings himself off of some high object. I don't see that warranting $5,000.
No.
Maybe I'm nuts, but
I think you're pretty in touch with the current product. I do believe that it's far too nuts to spend that amount of money when you can actually get some people together. And by the way, Cody did mention that this would be every couple of months as well, too. So it's actually moving away from the monthly pay-per-view format, going a little bit back towards the old school, which I think is a breath of fresh air.
I'll tell you, it's not that I'm just anti-WWE. Seth Rollins and AJ Styles was wrestling
Amazing.
elevated to art. It was a great match, but it's so uneven. Every pay-per-view, you could have WrestleMania, and then you could have meaningless pay-per-view number 7 of the year, and that'll be better than WrestleMania. There's no rhyme or reason. It's all slapped together quickly, and they have this big match in Saudi Arabia, and I'm like, I'm not excited to see any of those matches. I mean, I don't know. That doesn't grab me.
So let's discuss your role as a producer. I find this fascinating because this is not a profession you just stumble upon. You have to be able to have the ability to recognize an incredible story while drawing the maximum amount of emotion from it. So how did you get started, and how did you find yourself on The Wrestler, 2008? I mean, that was an Oscar-caliber movie.
Well, what I have learned is one thing always leads to another. So I'll give you an example. I was a sheet editor for 20 years. You mentioned dirt sheets. I did a sheet called Wrestling Then and Now. Killer Kowalski was one of my columnists, and it always had like a cult following, never made a lot of money. But a 50,000-watt radio station, WBAI-FM, Fred Giabold had a art show, and he happened to love wrestling, and he was a subscriber to my sheet. And he's like, why don't you come on and do radio with me? We could talk wrestling. So all of a sudden, I'm on BAI, and there's a huge audience, and we're bringing on Lou Thez in the middle of the night, New Year's Eve, Vern Gagne, Eddie Guerrero, 3 weeks after Art Barr died, sobbing on air, sobbing.
Wow.
Okay, I'll never forget it. Sherry Martel, late night, saying, I missed my kid growing up. I've been on the road 15 straight years.
That's tough.
The sacrifices these people made, and et cetera, so on. Just sitting there talking to all these legends, Bruno and Blassie and Albano, et cetera. I mean, basically, the history of this business, so many of them are gone at this point. And from there, I just got to know some of them, and Johnny Valiant's like, why don't you manage me? Literally manage me, book me for comedy appearance and autograph signings and et cetera, so on. And okay, so now I'm sitting with Johnny Valiant and Nikolai Volkov at an autograph signing, and by sheer coincidence, the executive producer of the wrestler, Scott Franklin, his best friend, walks in and says, you guys would be perfect for this project my best buddy is working on. It's called The Wrestler. And I don't know, I gave him my business card and really didn't think much of it. And months later, I get a call, why don't you guys come and meet with, Scott Franklin called, why don't you come and meet with the screenwriter, Rob Siegel, and Darren Aronofsky. And I brought Nikolai and Johnny Valiant and Nikolai's manager, Nikita Brezhnikov, who just wrote a great book on wrestling history, and the late Tiger Khan. And we sat, it was like very casual. We sat in a Manhattan bowling alley, where they serve food.
Yeah.
And basically Johnny and Nikolai were regaling them with wrestling stories and road stories and ring rats and the whole gamut, just telling them about the business. And next thing I know, I'm offered the job as associate producer, which in simple terms was I was the wrestling guy. I did 5 casting calls. I brought in Ron Killings and Necro Butcher. I brought in all these guys, and The Ring and Mickey's Stunt Double and Mickey's Alpha came in to manage Mickey, to train Mickey rather, and et cetera, so on. So, and I helped them with various changes in the script that didn't ring true to me on the wrestling end, and it just all clicked. It all clicked. So for months, I would take Darren and Scott Franklin, the executive producer, and Rob Siegel and other assorted people involved to various indie shows and Ring of Honor, who we eventually brought on board. And so what happened one day is we go to this convention, and it was really dead. It was just depressing. And Iron Sheik is literally sleeping. His head is down on the table. That's how grim it was. And this was not in the original script. So we're at this convention. It's Sheik, Nikolai, Lou Albano, Moolah, Mae Young, others. And it was just grim. And Rob wrote it into the script. He wrote it into the script. It wasn't there originally. So I'm on set, and Darren gets this smirk, and he's like, Evan, come here for a minute. And I'm like, yeah. Next thing I know, he has me. He's like, Evan, talk to all the... This was that really depressing autograph scene, which was based on the convention. So he's like, Evan, I want you to walk up to Mickey last, ask him for an autograph and a Polaroid. And Mickey whispers in my ear, just improv it. He thinks I'm an actor. I've never acted in my life. So as I'm talking to the various wrestlers, and the only real wrestlers that were there was Manny Yarborough, who was a black sumo. He was in the early UFCs. He's gone now. And Johnny Valiant, who didn't look like Johnny Valiant because he had gone gray, and They were the only legit wrestlers there. The others were all actors. So, you know, I'm talking to them, and then I walk up to Randy the Ram, you know, since we're acting, and I said, Randy, you know, I loved you as a kid. I saw you at the Garden. Could I have your autograph? So he goes, what's your name? So I think for a second, and I go, Evan. So it dawns on me how surreal this is that I'm playing myself in a fictional movie. How surreal this is. And Johnny Valiant said to me, there's probably 150 people on set, giant cameras. Johnny said, your hand was shaking. I go, perfect. Because, you know, when you're like starstruck
Yes.
and you meet your childhood hero, and Johnny, so Aronofsky runs over to me. He starts pounding me on the chest, going, that was great, that was great. And I'm like, I don't know. I was like, yeah, that's exactly what I would say in a situation like that.
I'm a natural. What can I say?
so we're sitting at the New York Film Festival when it's finally done. Lincoln Center, 2,300 people, and I'm sitting with my girlfriend, who's now my wife, and I don't know if it's even in the movie, that scene, you know, because nobody had seen it at that point. So I come on screen. She's looking at me. She's looking at the screen. She's looking at me. She goes, that's you. I go, yeah. So it was, you know, even that was like an experience. And, you know, 2,300 people spontaneously give the movie a standing ovation.
Wow.
And, you know, this is the New York Film Festival.
Of course.
I mean, so, you know, we knew we had something, and, you know, it was critically acclaimed. Mickey won the Golden Globe for Best Actor, and I just think it's an iconic performance. To me, it always reminds me of Marlon Brando on the waterfront. I could have been a contender. When Randy, the character, goes, I'm just a broken down piece of meat. Oh. It's just devastating.
Yes, it was. I remember watching that in theaters, and that was the exact moment where your heart sinks and it feels real, right? You're lost in the moment.
Yeah, and I said to him after, you know, the movie was done, I said, what did you think of the movie? He goes, I can't watch it. It reminds me too much of, you know, my own life. He said, I used to go down to the 7-Eleven and, you know, at night for cigarettes, and people would say things like, didn't you used to be Mickey Rourke? Okay? Which is rough. So it rejuvenated his career.
It did.
And he's been working steady ever since. Big movies, Expendables, and
Iron Man 2, right?
Iron Man 2, which was really his big payoff for the wrestler, because he got good money for Iron Man 2, and rightfully so. And he's been working steady for 10 years, and I think he's as good an actor as anybody out there. And he's, you know, and again, just a nice human being. I'm happy for him.
With pro wrestling documentaries now becoming more popular than ever before, you were ahead of the curve with 350 Days, a movie that really pulls back the curtain on professional wrestling as a whole, with so many well-known wrestlers really openly discussing their experience over the years. It was raw, very emotional. It featured dozens, if not hundreds, of interviews with the likes of Bret Hart, Superstar Billy Graham, Mass Superstar, and Ted DiBiase, just to name a few. Which interview was your favorite, and what was the process like?
So another Darren Antola, had the idea, let's do a documentary on these guys being on the road. Somebody like Ric Flair was literally on the road 350 days a year when he was champion. Okay. So Greg Valentine, who's a dear friend of mine, he stays with us when he's in town, and we book him for various things. Greg Valentine says to me, in the mid-'80s, Hulkamania peak, he said, I would estimate I was wrestling 320 days a year. So that 350 is accurate. You know, Flair got slightly more bookings than Greg. You know, Flair was the world champion. So,
of course.
So the idea was, what was the toll that 350 days on the road took on your body, your psyche, your marriage, your relationship with your kids. How many times could you tell your kid, I can't make your football game, I can't make your graduation, I can't make your wedding. I'm on the road. I have a big match on Thanksgiving. I have a big match on Christmas. The old school fans will remember Survivor Series, Starrcade. These events were on huge holidays where normal families got to spend time together. These guys were on the road wrestling.
Often an afternoon show and an evening show as well, too.
Many times, 2 1-hour Broadways the same day.
Jeez.
Can you imagine? And
2 hours total, God.
Yeah, and traveling to and from both shows. So, inevitably, I've had wrestlers tell me, Evan, I'm in constant pain. Constant pain. They hate the word fake. I'll tell you why. They'll say to me, gravity isn't fake. My hip replacement wasn't fake. My knee replacement wasn't fake. My 3 divorces weren't fake. And my kids not talking to me is not fake. And they resent the word fake. And they'll tell you from here to tomorrow, it's booked, it's worked, whatever.
Yeah.
But they don't like that word fake. It's like it hits a raw nerve. And the sacrifices that these guys made for us to entertain us, the bumps every night, in and out, in and out. So what happens? Painkiller addictions, early deaths. There's a mile-long line of wrestlers who died, before their time.
Prematurely.
I was sitting my wife loves Greg Valentine. He's just a dear friend, and so we're sitting here watching Greg Valentine and Davey Boy Smith, like 1986 from the Garden, and I tell her, my wife's not a huge fan. She just knows some of these guys personally through me. And I said, the guy Greg Valentine wrestled died at 40. Davey Boy Smith, 39 or 40. Davey Boy Smith.
Heart attack.
She was saddened, by it. And because you're watching this guy, and the guy's, a wrestling machine.
Yeah.
So Darren Antola comes up with this idea, and Fulvio Cesare, the director, interviewed a ton of people, and our editor, Michael Burlingame, he was not a wrestling guy. And I said to Darren, he's the right guy. He's worked with Paul McCartney, Mariah Carey, John Cougar Mellencamp, HBO, Showtime, etc., so on. I said, he doesn't know the quote-unquote job is from the stars, from the legends. He's going to make the movie that we need made. And I said to Mike, quote, make a movie that would make an 80-year-old woman who doesn't like wrestling or who's never watched wrestling cry. And he made that movie. And if you ask what's my favorite interview in there, I would say Billy Graham, because it's heart-wrenching. He's talking about this young girl who died in an accident, and her transplant saved his life. She donated her organs, and you actually see the picture of the girl, and she was beautiful, and she had the foresight to do this, and she saved his life. And you don't even have to be a wrestling fan to appreciate that scene or this movie.
Hits you.
Yeah, I mean it's very powerful, and I've had wrestler friends tell me they've had such unbelievable, joyful experiences. Johnny Valiant told me, he wrestled for oil sheiks 3 a.m. in Saudi Arabia. Like, where do people have experiences like this? The good, the bad, or ugly of it all. Just unique experiences, but there's always that guilt. I'm away from my family, away from my wife, on the road. I'm not there for my family. Maybe there financially, but not physically for the most part. No fault of their own. And, these guys, Dusty Rhodes used to do the shtick. I wined and dined with kings and queens. And, it's true. These guys saw the world on somebody else's dime. But at the same time, it was physically, mentally, emotionally exhausting. And, I don't want to paint a grim picture of the movie. Ox Baker's very funny, and even Greg Valentine has that dry sense of humor. And, there's moments of, levity in the film. It's not just as, And ironically, they all say they would do it again because they did have a lot of fun along the way also.
Great note to end on there. 350 Days is available via Amazon, iTunes, and on demand. The Evan Ginzburg Show, available via villageconnectionradio.com. Evan, thank you very much for joining me today.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. Thank you for letting me vent. It's therapeutic.
You can vent anytime.
Our topic of the week.
NXT TakeOver 25 takes place this coming Saturday, June the 1st, from the Webster Arena in Bridgeport, Connecticut, WWE's backyard. Kickoff show begins at 6 p.m. in the East. Main card, 7 p.m. in the East. 5 matches announced with an ample amount of time to tell a proper story. While this isn't necessarily the strongest NXT card on paper, it's bound to exceed expectations as per usual. Death, taxes, a memorable takeover event. These 3 things are certain. For the vacant NXT Tag Team Championship, it is the Undisputed Era versus the Street Profits versus the Forgotten Sons versus Oney Lorcan and Danny Burch. Since the Viking Raiders, I still want to call them the War Raiders, have moved up to Raw full-time, even though we don't see them on a weekly basis, they were forced to relinquish the NXT Tag Team Championship. This leaves 4 teams challenging to fill their void. The Undisputed Era are on a quest to regain past glory. The Street Profits pushed the pace and nearly defeated the Viking Raiders on an episode of NXT, but ultimately came up short. The Forgotten Sons were the runners-up in the 2019 Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic Tournament, and Oney Lorcan and Danny Burch, they've gone their separate ways, but reunite one final time in an effort to win the big one. My prediction is the Undisputed Era, tried, tested, and true. Matt Riddle versus Roderick Strong. Matt Riddle has frequently come to the aid of Johnny Gargano, and this has made him public enemy number 2 with the Undisputed Era. With Strong attacking Riddle backstage, this is a revenge match, and this will be a strong outing, sure, pun intended, for both men, but Riddle won't be dropping 2 takeover matches in a row. My prediction, Matt Riddle gets his arm raised. For the NXT North American Championship, it is the Velveteen Dream defending against Prince Pretty, Tyler Breeze. He makes his way back to NXT. And it's amazing how Tyler Breeze can hop down to NXT and seamlessly fit back into a championship picture, and it's completely believable. It's great to see Prince Pretty back, since this is where his best work was displayed. He's being wasted on the main roster at the moment. The story here is really a battle of egos more than anything else. The Dream has handedly gone through many fierce competitors, but Breeze would like to put a stop to the streak. The Dream wants to prove he's the best champion in NXT, while Breeze wants to prove he can still hang with the best. A sleeper for match of the night written all over it. My prediction is that the Velveteen Dream, DREAM, retains his North American Championship. For the NXT Women's Championship, Shayna Baszler versus Io Shirai. Io Shirai is one of the only individuals to hold a pinfall over Baszler. Granted, it was during a tag team match, but still rather impressive. With Kairi Sane on SmackDown Live, Shirai has been left to fend for herself, but a kendo stick has certainly helped even the odds a few weeks ago. Also, she can depend on Candice LeRae. Shayna is about as legitimately tough as they come, but always has the advantage with Duke and Shafir in her corner. Regardless of the advantage, Io Shirai is the future of the NXT Women's Division, and I expect this will be the beginning of a very long championship reign. My prediction, Io Shirai to become the new NXT Women's Champion. If it doesn't happen here, it will happen in Toronto this coming August. And luckily, I'll be there live for that. So I'm fine even if she doesn't win here, as long as she wins this coming August. For the NXT Championship, it is Johnny Gargano versus Adam Cole, baby. Say it in unison. These two put on an absolute classic. At NXT TakeOver New York, Cole has considered Johnny's victory to be a fluke and feels a rematch will once and for all prove that he's the better wrestler. Here's where it gets interesting from an optics perspective. If you take a quick glance at the roster, there's not many heels for Johnny to square off against, whereas Cole has many babyface options at his disposal if he were to be crowned champion. I would hate to see Johnny's reign cut short, but he did receive his big moment less than a few months ago, and another loss for Adam Cole would really kill his momentum. Similar to what we witnessed with Jericho and Omega last weekend, perhaps it makes far more sense to set up the big trilogy bout down the line than blow off the feud entirely. My prediction, Adam Cole to become the new NXT champion. Well, that is a wrap. We covered a whole heck of a lot in just under an hour. And let me tell you, despite the fact that there are a lot of criticisms on the modern state of professional wrestling, with Double or Nothing last weekend, and of course NXT this coming weekend, I believe the future is brighter than ever before. If you would be so kind, share this podcast, like it, tell your friends, family, and most importantly, fellow wrestling fans to tune in on a weekly basis. Until next Thursday, happy trails to you until we meet again.
This concludes another episode of The Signature Spot with Chris Toplack. For new episodes, subscribe on YouTube, Stitcher, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, or iTunes. And don't forget to follow The Signature Spot on Facebook for exclusive clips, polls, and opinions.